governance experience. Okay. On behalf of the leadership of the GORES, I want to welcome you to the second webinar series on natural resource governance experience sharing on revenue generated by extractive sector in particular, focusing on Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. The GORE Institute is a Pan-African civil society organization dedicated to the promotion of peaceful, self-reliant, and open society through research, reflection, and direct program intervention. We have positioned ourselves as one of the leading Pan-African civil society organizations dedicated to the promotion of fair and equitable distribution of revenue generated from extractive sector in West Africa. We have a general change mindset, which include dedicating ourselves to fostering tax justice, transparency, accountability in mining, mineral resource sector from human rights, peace building, and conflict prevention perspective. Within the scope of our mandate, we have succeeded in setting up multi-stakeholder dialogue with several platforms in Senegal. And this started from, let's say, earlier 2013, when we conducted a cross-comparative studies across West Africa, which gave us more confidence, self-confidence to do more. And as part of that effort, we succeeded in having funding for the Ford Foundation in Senegal, which basically aimed at fostering fair and equitable distribution of revenue generated from mineral and oil resources in Senegal. This project was rewarding, and based on its reward, we were able to contribute in fostering capacity enhancement and foster monitoring and also helping influencing policies at the state level. So with this, we were able to acquire further support, this time to see the extent to which the experience acquired in Senegal could be cross-fertilized to other countries, also affected by natural resource governance challenges. So we are focused on Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, 3 Anglophone West African states, and also Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Guinea-Conakry, Francophone West African states. These are countries at different stages and different levels, with different challenges in natural resource governance. So we conducted cross-comparative experience sharing, which we just completed. We also look at natural resource regulations and policy, and also map out stakeholders and operational actors in mineral sectors in the respective countries. So this webinar series is a second series, which we've just completed, the one for the Francophone West African state. We consider it ideal to do it for the same 4 Anglophone West African states to basically see the extent at which we can enforce the experience and lessons learned, and how we can share those lessons learned to other countries and deal with our common challenges. At the end of the day, it's African solution to African problems. So to do this, we consulted a consulting firm called RCL, situated in Senegal, which is headed by the Cheikh Tidiane Touré, who is going to animate the webinar today, who is the resource person for the webinar. Cheikh Touré is a natural resource governance expert with more than 25 years experience in the field, and is the founder of this consulting firm that conducted the study for the GORE Institute. He specializes in natural resource governance, and also he's a founding member of the EITI Senegal, and also an executive committee, member of the executive committee for Senegal, this office of the president over some years, and succeeded in contributing to quite a lot of change. He conducted quite extensive studies with the World Bank and other international agencies. So he's somebody with a vast experience in terms of oil, with respect to oil and gas, and contributed to policy influencing in Senegal and other West African states. He is a specialist in strategic planning, capacity enhancement, leadership, and also coaching, and also is a policy analyst. Without much ado, I want to invite our resource person for the webinar today, on the theme experience sharing on the revenue generated by extractive sector in Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. Without much ado, Chef Toure, can I kindly invite you to do this presentation on behalf of the Gore Institute, and at the end of the day, we will get quite a lot of thought-provoking experience from our respective participants from the countries. We know that this will not be exhaustive because we only have 1 hour, but at the end of the day, we will learn much from other colleagues from the respective countries. So, Chef Toure, the floor is yours, sir.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Kali, for this introduction. It's always a pleasure, actually, to interact with this wonderful team of Gore Institute, in particular, Mr. Kali, who is one of the lead principal researcher, and all of his team. They are great people, and actually, I believe the work that you're doing today is extremely useful and timely, really timely, because what a great time, actually, to be discussing about extractive sector revenue. We are based in Senegal, although you have you're intervening in the old, you're operating in the old region, but Senegal is actually getting ready for its first oil for next year, and the budget has the new bill has recently been passed. So you see in real lifetime what it means, actually, to be dealing with these issues. And I believe it's really important for all type of stakeholders, in particular the civil society people, to have a full participation, full leadership exercised in this very interesting and important topic. We've seen experiences from other countries like Ghana, like Nigeria, like Sierra Leone, as you mentioned, which we're going to cover for this work, for this presentation. So I'll try to be very, let's say, for me, we're going to have a chat around this extractive sector, extractive revenue management in the region, and hopefully we'll be able to share some ideas, and of course maybe test some of our thought, and then get your feedbacks and to improve ourselves in the work that we do. So basically, we're looking forward. We're hoping to address the issue, the topic, through by addressing different aspects. One is just reminding ourselves the characteristic of the extractive sector revenues, the issues and the implications, okay, because they have some peculiarities, the drivers and pace of reforms in the extractive sector governance in the 3 countries that will be covered. Of course, we'll touch a bit on it, and probably with the discussion we'll try to go even further in the discussion. We'll have a quick look at the institutional framework, and then we'll look at the real policy that is governing actually the management of the revenues, the risk associated to the choice, actually policy choices that have been made by different countries, and then we'll try to draw some lessons and look at the perspectives and possible recommendations. So I hope everyone is able to hear me, and there's no difficulties at this stage. So we on the issue, to remind ourselves about the issue, as I explained, especially, extractive revenues are very particular revenues. source of income, in particular the oil and gas. Okay, oil produce, for example, more wealth than any other source of income. In many countries, it has driven exponential growth in a very short period of time. If you look at, for example, the figures for Ghana, between 2008 and 2015, I think they've been able to double actually the per capita income for the country. While we know Ghana has not been an extremely rich country actually in terms of gas production and oil production. So just to give you that example, the competitive nature also, when I talk about the competitive nature, I mean is here I'm trying to compare it with the borrowing, the debt actually, that is a source of financing development for our government, or ODA, the Official Development Assistance. And it's clear and well established by several researchers that an effective mechanism, fiscal policy, and its effective implementation can help government really raise enough money to actually fund some of the government projects. And that's why for many countries, when they find these opportunities, for them, it's like a windfall. It's we have to use it in a way that allows us to actually close the gap, the deficit, infrastructure deficit, energy deficit, and certain other challenges that they have in terms of structural element that will be able to support and drive the development in the long term. Other elements that needs to be reminded is the volatility of this source of income, because we don't control the market, unfortunately. So market situation can change overnight. We experiencing a situation like this today with the food crisis and the war in Ukraine and even the COVID. You have external shocks actually that can very quickly affect the country's balance in terms of macroeconomic management. And then you have also an element of confidentiality. It has been established by several papers and research actually that oil revenue are quite easy to hide actually as compared to other type of revenues. For example, the donors ODA, or for example, the debts are not really difficult to hide, are very difficult to hide actually. But oil revenues, because of all the process that is involved and the operations and the control that can have its weaknesses and deficiencies, makes it really easy for the elite in certain countries to hide it. So that said, it has a number of implications, and basically we're going to highlight some of them. One is the necessity, the need to actually register all the transactions and revenue in the government accounting system. That's really, really important. And I can give you a number of experiences or in places where I work, where I found people trying to avoid actually the government traditional channel actually for registering the revenues and managing the revenues, the country's revenue. Approval by the parliament is also another good practice. Let's say we will call them the best practices. Compliance with all the financial regulation. And when we talk about financial regulation here, we'll focus on what is called the GAPS, which is the generally accepted principles and practices. That's basically what you will find in the principles of Santiago Principle. Okay, that is actually the rules that are recommended by the IMF for good optimal management of the sovereign wealth fund. You have also the statutory control that needs to be in place by the higher supreme audit institutions. In Senegal, it will be the Office of the Auditor General, actually. Even in Ghana, actually, that's the case. So, and then CSOs and citizens' right to exercise monitoring and participation. It may go even beyond that, actually, and we'll come back to that. So the other reminder, very quickly for us, is that oftentimes we see that, especially when you work with a CSO, in particular in the Francophone Africa, people tend to focus on the revenue distribution, which is just a component, actually, a segment of the value chain. It does not cover all the value chain. While when you talk about revenue management, it's a whole value chain that starts from the, and that you will find actually in a number of instruments, regional instruments, international instruments. Even in EITI, it's recommended. Even if you look at the Natural Governance Charter, you'll find aspects of that. If you go to the African Mining Vision, if you go to the ECOWAS, harmonization guidelines, a number of actually tools and laws that we use, international law, actually have very specific and very relevant recommendations and guidelines for government to start from the very beginning of the value chain. So now we would like to look at the give ourselves some more context, actually, because I'm sure not everyone is in Nigeria. And to do that, let's use the diagram. I think we tried to say to represent what we tried to say there in the previous slide in this diagram. Of course, I have to confess that it's not comprehensive, but it gives you certain elements that reminds ourselves of the reform process, okay, and institutions that are in place, from the Constitution in 1999 that has a very clear and very well written clause on the ownership that state that the ownership of the natural resource goes to the people, and putting the people at the center of its management, and the need for transparency, and everything that goes together with it. So you will find that's maybe one thing I would like to highlight. Actually, you will find the red flags. Actually, I tried by doing that work, I realized that there were two elements in my view that was very, very interesting for people who are who have interest in the policymaking process. It's the EITI validation and the presidential election. We might need to go further, to do some further work to see whether legislative election also would apply to this. But what we're trying to say is that these two elements have been kind of, in our view, an accelerator of reform. Okay, it's a great window of opportunity for advocacy organization to see exactly the timing for the policy proposals and things like that. Okay, so okay, and yeah. Apart from Nigeria, I think you had a chance to read, so I didn't need to go through it. If you have any difficulty, you can let me know. Just to mention that for Nigeria, there were a big appetite for reform recently, back to 21, sorry, and the new Petroleum Industry Act, among others, actually created for the first time the Host Community Development Trust Fund, which never existed actually, and but of course we'll come back to it. It still has been under criticism for numerous reasons. And you have also the new petroleum bill, which actually the government tried to adopt actually since in the past 10 years, let's say, because the first attempt was dated back to 2010 and then 2012. And then, each time they tried to pass the bill, you have a fierce opposition, maybe sometimes from the oil producing region, sometimes from other stakeholders like the investors themselves. Okay, if we look at the case of Ghana, we prefer the diagram. Ghana has been, oh, sorry.
This is Sierra Leone.
Oh yeah, this is Sierra Leone, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go to Ghana and then I'll come back. I hope, okay, it's, I get it right. I think so.
Yeah, you got it right this time.
Yeah, okay. So, so for Ghana, Ghana has been, they has expressed their interest in joining EITIs at the beginning of the EITI of the process when it was launched. At that time, the country was only producing, was quite strong in the mining sector, but not in the oil and gas. In 2005, it also signed up to the Kimberley process and established its permanent secretariat. These are interesting dynamics. Sometimes it's the driver for these reforms is from within, from the country, for internal drivers. Okay. In other cases, they are, international new paradigm or international, instruments that are being developed, and global alliance that, and in many cases, these countries were able to come along and support this initiative. So in 2008, in 2007, the major discovery of oil, commercial discovery of oil in the Jubilee field by Tullow Oil. And in the same year, we have Ghana that became a member country implementing EITI. The year that followed, you had also the presidential election. I think it would be interesting to see whether it's, in terms of the month and the, usually it's in the same trend. We realize actually by doing this research that sometimes candidates are trying to make a good impression, and they want to, to seduce the voters, and they come up with very interesting reforms, and it has been a very strong trend in our view that you can identify in Guinea, in Senegal, in every country. You have also another element that was Ghana started its oil production in 2010, and then in 2011 they came up with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Okay, so which means they started without having that law in place, but then very quickly they were able to develop a very interesting. I had a great pleasure actually to do some work in the Ghanaian context, and some benchmark work and field visits, meeting all the stakeholders in the country, and I was really impressed by the quality of that law. Although a few years after, it was under criticism because they started. As you know, if you're familiar with public policy, you know what is called gaming the system. So the politicians were able to start playing with the rules and understanding the limitation of the rules, and being able to bypass. And in this case, one of the big problems was the capping of the stabilization fund. Okay. 2012, you have the presidential election. 2016, you have a constitutional, the new the new constitution that vested actually their ownership of and right of all mineral and natural resources to the president, who is supposed to manage them on behalf of the people. It's a very interesting. I mean, it's written in a way that I found really interesting. Of course, it's not the issue here, but it's just a milestone that we need to keep in mind to make sure that people have been given the right to actually own the resources and to have full access to information and a number of other rights. 2017, the amendment of the law on the carried interest. So that was with the, no, sorry, amendment of the law actually to improve the management of the heritage fund. Okay, and you have later on in 2019, I think, right after the elections, you have the adoption of the latest regulation that is currently used to organize the natural resource, I mean, the oil, petroleum revenue management in the country. Maybe I should mention that for the two countries, Ghana and Nigeria, we focus on the oil sector. We did not talk about the mining sector. But whereas for Sierra Leone, we only focus on the mining sector. Okay. So in terms of institutional framework, we didn't want to take a lot of time with this. Of course, we have a number of institutions in every country, actually. If you look at the case for, this is Nigeria, for example, we did not listed all the institutions. There are so many, but we just wanted to share a few of them, and while keeping in mind the fact that in our lands, we have the policy, the management, the regulation, and the operation. Okay, so the policy level, starting with the presidency of the federal of the federation, the management means here all the institutions actually responsible, charged with the supervising, overseeing, implementing the policies, and then you have the regulatory bodies where you have different type of regulators. You have some of them actually focus on the sector management. Others deal with environmental issues, and others deal with pure financial oversight. Okay, we did not mention it here, but of course you have the Office of the Auditor General, which I did not come across a lot actually in the Nigerian experience. Maybe someone might be able to comment on it, as opposed to what we had in Ghana. Of course, you have the Parliament as well, and as we mentioned in 2021, you have the Host Community Development Trust Fund, which we considered as a development institution that is in charge of supervising the long-term planning and implementation of projects in the Niger Delta region. So here we have the Ghanaian framework as well. We didn't intend to be comprehensive. I'm sorry, but in Ghana you have the Bank of Ghana, which is, let's say, we call it an umbrella. I would call it an umbrella body here because it has huge responsibility for managing all the entities actually that are responsible for the disbursement and of the funds, and doing the housekeeping of the financial resources, let's say. You have an investment advisory committee and the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, which actually absorbed, is one of the major beneficiary of the investment, because clearly the country is trying to close the infrastructure deficit. And in Ghana, we should just mention, I don't know if we will come back to that, but we should just mention that according to the law, the government has a responsibility to propose 4 areas, priority areas, and that will be approved by the parliament for 3 years, which means that if they decide on investment, then in those investment from these resources would have to go in those specific sectors that have been identified and approved. And of course, they are given opportunity to make revision only once, I think, every 3. No, the program is approved for 3 years, and they have a possibility to revise it halfway in the course of implementation. And you have the regulatory body, you have the Petroleum Commission, you have the Parliament, which I found very active, and even in the way the legislation is designed, they give a very important responsibility to the Parliament. And I don't know if it still prevails, but I was very much interested to see by the fact that the Parliament of Ghana would have to approve the annual work program, actually, that is proposed by the operator. Okay, and especially, of course, but through the GNPC, because GNPC is, of course, part of the joint venture. So that level of responsibility of Parliament was very impressive. Someone from Ghana, if we have one here, may be able to comment on it. And of course, you have the Office of the Auditor General for the oversight work. One very original and I think innovation of Ghana was the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, the PIAC, which actually by law has been appointed as an independent body. And from in 2011, in the first draft of the law, they were not really funded, but in the amendment, they started receiving money from the Ministry of Finance, which did not compromise actually the independence and the autonomy in the way they operated. So it was, and they were tasked with the responsibility to produce 2 reports a year, and their reports were actually mandatory to be submitted before the Parliament could approve the new annual budget. So that was a really interesting level of commitment and involvement of, let's say, civil society and other segments, apart from the traditional government actors and stakeholders that we used to have in other countries. So Sierra Leone, of course, we have. Let me look at the diagram. Oops. Oh, I think for Sierra Leone. Oh, sorry, I passed actually that diagram, but no problem. I think, yeah, for Sierra Leone, you have different stakeholders. Like everywhere, you have the revenue authorities, those who are with responsibility to manage the finance and revenue collections. You have, the National Mineral Agency, but there's a trend. I think I might go back to it just for you to see. there is a trend that I found interesting. For example, 2018 has been a very interesting period. You have in presidential election, you have EITI validation at the same time, and you have 3 reforms. Actually, the third has not been displayed here, at least. There may be more than that. But the third one was a new policy on geo-management, management of geo-data information, geo-information, something like that. So, and their management. So, of course, but that all that trend was part of the appropriation of the Africa mining vision and the operational implementation of the principles of the Africa mining vision and the action plan. Okay. At the same time, you'll see also that the period here between 2007 and 2009 has been also a very active period in terms of reforms. So now let's go back to the presentation. So from the institutional from our review of the institutional framework, I think one of the things that we notice is that in the 2 countries where you have, I mean, the oil producing countries, you have sovereign wealth funds that were created. So with the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority that was created in 2011, and that is managing the stabilization fund and the heritage fund, so future generation fund. And in Ghana as well, you have that same almost trend. While in Sierra Leone, you don't have that, but you have usually it's in the mining sector in particular, the most common arrangement that you find is a development fund, actually community development fund, or the CDA, the community development agreement. We'll come back to it. Now the other element are here for us to be able to just to make our own judgment. We need to make sure that while we can have a very dense ecosystem of institutions from one country to another, according to country context, according to their specific needs. And we know that, for example, Nigeria is a big country. It's a federal country. You have different structure, decentralization systems that applies. Beyond all those specificities, what's important is to be able to see whether you have the separation between certain functions. Okay, for example, in Senegal, we used to have back to 2012 when we started the EIT, the implementation of EITI, we had only la direction des mines et de la géologie, which is the mining and geology directorate. Okay, but when we started with the EITI, the first exercise of data collection and reconciliation, we realized that there were certain problems actually, because the one who is awarding the licenses were the same who were supposed to do exercise oversight and control. So that was a challenge, and that's how actually the Senegal came up with the split of these functions. So it's also the same thinking here that applies. The other element is you may have the institutions all in place, but are they really? I mean, are the rules implemented really? Okay, and do they comply with the rules? Okay, and the effective positioning and the legislative role of the parliament and its oversight role as well is something that is extremely important. Of particular importance as well is the role of the state-owned enterprises, which is in this case the national oil company, or in the mining sector, if you have a national oil, mining company that is responsible for the managing all the state's interest in equities in the sector. And lastly, the effective participation of civil society actors in the overall management of the sector. Kali, is it taking too long? How many time do I have left?
Just go ahead. It's just let's say in the next 5-10 minutes, possibly.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so let's look at very quickly the distribution scheme. For example, if you look at the case of Sierra Leone, we start with the mining sector here. If you look at the case of Sierra Leone, it's a very, let's say, progressive, I would say, interesting system that they have. Firstly, with three major mechanism or levies. You have the first strategy, let's say, that is used to transfer revenue to this from central to international government level of government is through the derivation principle. The derivation of that applies to a mechanism that is called the Diamond Area Community Development Fund. But as you can imagine, as you see, it talks about diamond. It does not mention other it doesn't apply necessarily to the other substances, mineral substances, and it's that through that mechanism, the government is required to transfer 25%, which is quite important, of the 3% tax export tax on export value of all diamond mined in the artisanal license holders, by the artisanal license holders. Okay, and how that money is shared, you see 20% to the district and district council, 20% to the chieftaincy council, and 60% to chieftaincy council, depending on the number of craft licenses. Okay. The other mechanism is a direct payment from the company. Direct payment from the company, but that only applies to especially to the surface rental. And the money goes essentially to the landowners, 15% to the supreme leader, 15% to the district council, 10% to the chieftaincy council, and 10% to local development fund. That's very interesting here. 10% to the local development fund. And the third element or component of the strategy is through the community, the so-called community development agreement, where companies or operating companies are required to come up with an agreement and spend 1% at least of the turnover on community development projects. Okay. So to talk about, we tried to identify some of the interesting element here. People's rights and ownership of natural resources are defined in the Constitution. If you look at the overall model for Sierra Leone, because it may sound obvious, but it's not always the case in every country. The monitoring of tax revenue and expenditure by the National EITI Committee, which has been very interesting element and development, actually, because in previous reports, it was very difficult to have that information reconciled. Even the tracking of the information was difficult from one reporting party, and now they were able to get the two parties to declare the information so that they can make the reconciliation. And a mix offer between a modern and a customary law in income management and redistribution. In terms of well, what we could identify as weaknesses, you have what I mentioned earlier on, which is that the mechanism, the flagship mechanism that is used in the country is only applied to diamond exports, okay, not other resources, mineral resources. There may be also some weak consideration actually of macroeconomic dimensions, which I think is a very common issue in certain countries. Well, of course, I mean countries with that exploit mining resources. For example, in Senegal, you don't have a stabilization fund only for the revenue generated by the mining sector. In other countries, it can be sometimes very significant, but still, you don't have that type of arrangement to make sure, in case of external shocks, or in case of because of the volatility of the commodities, you won't have big problems when prices go down. Past distribution scheme favoring local elite to the detriment of long-term development projects, and low participation and control by the National Assembly over the management of mineral resources. So in the case of Ghana, I think it's let's say it's almost the opposite actually, because Ghana's model has been. I'm sorry, this diagram can be improved. It's not very, but I'll try to explain. Ghana put the emphasis on the macroeconomic management, and they put the emphasis on the long-term strategy. As I explained, even the investment strategy that is used and the investment policies that has been approved by the Investment Advisory Committee and of course through the Ministry of Finance, basically look at the long-term trend, which I think is a very interesting element actually, because in many cases we've seen sometimes countries who are able to spend, to share the revenue with communities. But at the end of the day, it does not change the living conditions. If you look at the long term or the medium term, over 10 years, you do that, you may not see a transformation. While, so that was one element. So here for Ghana, you have the APFA. APFA is the annual budget, okay? So which is approved by the government, by the parliament, sorry, okay, for government to spend. And the system say here, it's the 70-30 rule, okay? 70% of the revenue from the oil and gas is used for investment. I mean, goes to the annual budget, and through the annual budget will be used for investment. Okay, there are certain rules that prevent government to use them for the recurrent expenditures. Okay, and then 30% goes to the saving account, and the saving account is managed by the central bank through the Petroleum Holding Fund, and the Petroleum Holding Fund is comprised of two branches. One is the Ghana Heritage Fund, and the other is the Stabilization Fund. So those 30% are split you know, between those two funds, 70% for the stabilization fund and 30% to the heritage fund, so for future generation fund. We can come back to that if there are questions. Okay, in terms of strength, the revenue management is fully integrated with the macroeconomic management. I think it's a really interesting point. The long-term planning and prioritization of large development projects, as we mentioned, formalization with the PIAC, Public Interest and Accountability Committee, really interesting and innovation in this, with clear responsibility and actually responsibility given by law. That's really only a situation I found in Ghana, nowhere else in the West Africa region. And the strong oversight of the role of the parliament, though you know, people still manage to game the system again, as I mentioned earlier on. Some weaknesses, the model seem to downplay some of the human rights, social justice, and equity issues, but it's partly because of the, you know, I we'll come back to that. Let's just mention that point. And the other element is the accountability alone, actually, because you have all the institutions in place, and rules are very clear and should be applied. But still, there were some challenges with the implementation of certain you know, to come up with a budgetary discipline. And you all heard recent discussions between Ghana and IMF. They were very frustrated, and we know as well that back to 2015, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had to, you know, call on IMF for support and, you know, to restructure the public, the public economic management, to reorganize the public economic management. For Nigeria, you have also a distribution scheme with the derivation principle that has been approved by the constitution. Okay, and the derivation, if you look at here, it applies to 13%. Okay, so here they use, you have 52% that remain with the Federation of Nigeria, and the rest is distributed between the states and the local government according to different criteria, as you can see in the paper. And at the end of the day, you have the states earn 26%, roughly 27, and 20%, 21% go to the local government. And of course, the derivation formula, when I talk about derivation, I mean the principe de rétro, sorry, okay. I mean the fact that part of the revenues are returned to the producing region. Okay. Okay. So in the case of Nigeria, of course, yeah. In the case of Nigeria, we can see that the constitution gives right to the citizens over natural resources. Nigeria managed to maintain, despite all the criticism, because of course they were faced criticism of the Nigerian experience and the relationship between the federation and the states. But if you look at the history, and especially the Biafra war, because of the resources, actually, one of the major cause of the war was war related. I mean, resource related. So, yeah.
Sorry, can I?
Sure.
I think we only have very few minutes. Let's say 3 minutes more. to finish, you can just conclude, and then we come to
Okay.
questions.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to listen to the audience on the risk factors, basically, because yeah, and that's an approach I wanted to use. And of course, I have my own thought about it, and we can discuss it if time allows it. And few lessons. Again, we mentioned already that EITI validation process and national election are seemingly influencing decision makers in their commitment to reform. I think it's a really important point here that may need to be looked at in greater depth. We also noticed that not all decisions and reform are fully implemented, however, so, which means that we can we also need to find additional instruments actually to make sure that not only good policies are in place, but beyond good policies, we need to find a way to make them to enforce them. Revenue distribution formula based on derivation may contribute to stability, but it seems to have little effect on long-term economic development. This is a very thought-provoking. I'm sure many people may disagree with it, but yeah, I would love to hear the argument on it. And the final point for us is to say that Parliament may need to have a very important role, and civil society and other interest groups are more effective if well-established, competent, and well-funded. All right, so thank you very much, and I hope we'll be able to interact.
Oh, thank you very, very much for this thought-provoking presentation, and I like the way you ended it by having a strong parliament and strong civil society dedicated to fostering transparency, accountability in the management of natural resources, contributing to oversight and supervisory functions in state institutions. I think those are key areas I think there's a need we need to focus on. Thank you very much. At least your presentation is expected to look at cross-comparative experience and see lessons learned from other environments that could help to enhance practices in another countries. I think you've been able to deal with that effectively. We are not expecting a very exhaustive presentation from the three countries within a space of time, but you were able to cover quite a lot. But the most interesting part of your presentation is that you said it's provided growth in country like Ghana. It's very easy to generate growth to deal with some things, but when it comes to prioritization of the resources acquired and allocation of that resources, sometimes is where we get it wrong, especially when quite a lot of stakes are involved in the process of allocating resources, especially to the deprived segment of society. You were able to look at like the Heritage Fund in Ghana and Nigeria is very interesting as compared to Sierra Leone, which just community development fund. But the other interesting part is during election, political actors use natural resource governance sector reform as a bargaining chip to win election by criticizing what's been done and to put their own agenda. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We've seen that in quite a lot of countries. Well, without much to talk about this, because we have a short space of time, I would like to invite clarifications from participants from the respective countries. They can raise their voice, their hands, whoever wants to make contribution. Please, let's make it very short and to the point and precise, because we don't have much time. Unfortunately, the presentation is so interesting that we just forget about the time. But we invite comments, especially from Nigeria, where quite a lot of things were not so said. But at the same time, the resource person, Mr. Toure, is waiting for your contribution to within such how certain things happen. So we look forward to those comments, suggestions, and recommendations. The floor is open.
So I don't know if I can go.
Yeah, you can go. Your name, sir?
Yes, I am Sakindema from Sierra Leone.
Sakendema.
Yes, from Sierra Leone.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I want to join you in thanking the presenter. I think this was a job well done.
Thank you.
And this gives us an idea if we are to do comparative analysis of where the strengths are, where the challenges are, and where we think we can improve.
Yes.
So I work for a civil society organization called Campaign for Good Governance.
Okay.
And monitoring natural resource governance, especially in terms of the revenue stream, is key to us. For Sierra Leone, we have the ministry that is charged with the Ministry of Mines and Mineral Resources that is charged with the responsibility of developing policies, and you have the NMA that is charged with the responsibility of implementing it. Just as others, we have the EITI, and the EITI, we have the multi-stakeholders group of which civil society is well represented. And in terms of the revenue flow, the problem we've had over the years is that we started mining here since 1930. Since 1930 to date, there is little we could show, especially in these mining areas. And that's sort of ignite our interest of late to see how we can track revenue stream in some of this community. As he rightly mentioned, we have the DACDF, that's the Diamond Area Development Fund, and we have the CDF, that's the Community Development Area Fund. What the DACDF look at is that revenues being generated within the diamond areas, and you have communities that do not have diamond, but they have oil and other things that rutile. For those communities, that's where we have the CDF. So of late, who we are located, because in our law, we have the 0.01%, which is to be allocated to these communities for development of these communities. And these communities, this is done through the community development agreement, wherein communities are to identify projects, and these projects are to be supported with these revenues from these communities, especially the most affected mining communities. So just to bring that, we focus is not only on the Diamond Area Development Fund, we as well look at areas where we have rutile mining taking place, the bauxite and other minerals as such.
Okay, thank you.
In all of that,
okay.
in all of that, what we've identified is that there is a huge challenge when it comes to transparency and accountability. In the terms of transparency, yes, some community people are aware of that this community development committee exists, and they are receiving the revenues from these mining communities. But how these revenues are utilized, the accountability aspects, is where the challenges.
Yeah, understood.
That's where the challenges.
Yeah.
You might have an idea that a mining company is operating here. What has been given to that mining, what mining company has given to the community for operations, you see that is not made known. And because that is not made known, assumption comes in. And some of the assumptions are wrong. And what happens at the end of the day is that you see chaos becomes the order of the day in some of these areas, because the people still go with the belief that these companies are mining our communities and we are not receiving any revenue from them. Little realizing that you have few people they refer to as the elders that sort of siphon some of this money and they do not communicate. So accountability and transparency is a key challenge.
Okay.
And another problem,
okay,
which I want to bring here is that for us, the second one is communication gap. You know, the companies do not operate with everybody in the particular community. They operate with few people, especially the chiefs. So it's the responsibilities of the chief that once they engage they do engagement with this community, with these mining companies, whatever that is being discussed or agreed upon is being cascaded to the rest of the community residents.
okay.
But this is not being done. So you see that there is a huge communication gap within these people, within the authorities and the residents within these communities. So there is a whole huge challenge that we identify. If we address this, I think this will be key to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kendama. That was a very brilliant contribution to the debate. Any more hands, any contribution, any question, any clarification?
Yes, good
Yes,
afternoon.
yes,
Sorry, I've
yes,
had
please.
my hand up for a while. I
Yes.
just guess
Oh,
you didn't see
yes,
it.
yes, I've just seen that. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes.
The
So my
name?
name is Abiodun Bayewu and I represent Global Rights. And thank you so much, Sorry, for that very brilliant presentation. There are certain issues that I think that we should take cognizance of. First is that mining is important in Nigeria. It's often overlooked. We keep looking at the hydrocarbons, but not the mining. Nigeria is losing so much money to mining, not just being accountable for mining. For example, for gold, we lose more than $500 million a year. Sorry, we've lost more than $500 million in the span of 4 years, and that is absolutely crazy. That said, there is a strong distinction. While Nigeria is a federation, the revenue allocation is still from, I'm so sorry, it's a very loud noise in someone's background. That revenue allocation is still from the center. And that is also enabling quite a lot of corruption. Not that there's no corruption at the state level. And talking about the state level, that while we have the channels to send revenue back to the states from which the minerals or the hydrocarbon resources are derived from, there is no accountability matrix at the state level to be accountable for the resources that gets to the state. One of the things I also did note across the entire West African region is, while we're talking about the allocation of resources and how these resources are managed, we're not talking about the externalized costs and how these countries are managing the externalized costs, most of which are borne by the communities from which the minerals are derived. We're also moving very fast towards the end of oil, for example. So for the countries that have oil resources, hydrocarbon resources like Nigeria, and the countries that are just upcoming, Ghana, Senegal, that we need to think very much deeper about what resources are our countries putting away for the end of oil. I know Ghana's got the Heritage Fund, and it would be great to hear more about it. And I know that this call is too short to learn more about it, but these are the thoughts I basically would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Yes, there is somebody, Masiba. Mr. Masi, your hands are, Mr. Masi. Mr. Masi? Oh, okay, he's not coming on. Anybody else wants to contribute? Okay.
Can I quickly say something?
Yeah, Peter. Peter, go ahead.
This is okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is Peter Ebule from Nigeria also. And thank you for that important contribution. It's also important for us to, like my sister has just said, for us to begin to give a lot of emphasis on transition, energy transition. It's unfortunate that in Africa, especially in Nigeria, we are playing by the template from the Western world, who have also enjoyed the hydrocarbon that they're asking us.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello.
Oh.
Hello.
I
this
think
is Masiba.
Yeah,
yeah,
Masiba,
hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is just to join my colleagues, Kendema from Sierra Leone. I'm also calling from Sierra Leone. For me, the disconnect between the communities and the district, regional, and national structures is very challenging.
Masiba, can I come back to you? Somebody was online while you came in. Yes,
no
Peter,
problem, no problem.
Peter, continue, please.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Your line was breaking.
Okay, I was saying that let me make it simple. One thing that we also have to take seriously in Nigeria, and I believe in Ghana and some other countries, is the issue of energy transition. What are we transiting from and what are we transiting to? I think we have to have our own template and agree what works for us, both in terms of political consideration and economic consideration. That is one. Two, in Nigeria, there is also a lopsided attention on the hydrocarbon area, that's the oil and gas.
Your line is breaking. Okay. Well, Masi, can you continue, please?
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much. Like I said, I'm in Sierra Leone. Joining
my end keeps going on and off.
Okay, it's coming back
location. Yeah.
Yes,
so
go ahead.
The final point I want to make is there are new openings for us to engage the process, especially in Nigeria, with the PIA. The Petroleum Industry Act in Nigeria has.
Oh, good. The line is still breaking.
I mean, the Petroleum Industry Act has been introduced in Nigeria, and that has created a lot of opportunities for us to engage the system. So this is one thing we also have to encourage ourselves to engage, interrogate, and also optimize the opportunities therein. I think if there's any other thing, I will write in so that this line doesn't go off on me again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yes. Masi.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to say we as CSOs, we should also take into consideration most time the mining companies environmental impact assessment. In Sierra Leone, the impact on our environment, our mining environment is very huge, meaning that these companies, they do this environmental impact assessment for them to be issued with licenses. But when it comes to implementing them, taking into consideration what they said they will do, many a time we having challenges in that area. If you go to Kono district in Sierra Leone and other mining communities, the impact of mining on those mining communities is very huge. And I think as CSOs, we need to take that seriously when we do our advocacy with local governments and national governments. That's just my most of the points I wanted to raise have been stated already by my brother, Sir Kendema. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, my compatriot. Thank you so much, my brother.
Welcome.
Yes. Any other comments? Maybe we've not heard from you from Ghana. I know you're there. Mabel?
Hello, Kali.
Yes, Mabel. Thank you very much for your participation.
Good day, everyone.
Yes, good day.
I was actually typing my submission when you mentioned my name.
Okay.
Just to make it short, thank you very much for putting this together, and many thanks to the presenter as well. For Ghana, I think when it comes to revenue distribution and utilization in terms of the legal framework and institutional framework is quite robust because there is a revenue distribution and utilization framework legally. When you go to the mining sector, particularly for our mineral royalties, we have the Mineral Development Fund, and we also have the Mineral Income Investment Fund, which is to guide the collection and the distribution of mineral royalties. Unfortunately, that's where it ends. Other forms of mineral revenues in terms of taxes and all, those ones go to the consolidated fund, and hence difficult to track how they are being used to be able to pinpoint any socioeconomic impact that the country has made from its minerals development over a century of mineral production. However, the case is different for the petroleum. I think lessons were learned when there was petroleum discovery in 2007 and in 2011 when we started receiving petroleum receipts. So we have the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, which governs the collection, the allocation, and the full utilization of all petroleum revenues, being it taxes or rentals, any other form of revenue, so far as it's coming from petroleum, goes to the Petroleum Holding Fund, and the distribution are done as prescribed in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. So that makes it easier for civil societies and other accountability institutions, being it state or being it non-state, to monitor how petroleum revenues are being used and hold government into account as to their use and where there are balances. So when it comes to the petroleum revenue side, there are the accountability mechanism relatively is very strong. And the law also provides for the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, which is although funded by the state, but supposed to be a citizen oversight for the management of petroleum revenues. So that has been good. The problem with the PRMA has been the discretionary powers that has been ceded to the Minister for Finance, because from the presentation, we learned that 70% of the petroleum revenues goes into investment. But when you look at the PRMA critically, it does not state that 70%, it says up to 70%, meaning, yes, meaning that the finance minister has the discretion at any point in a particular year to even decide that only 10% of petroleum revenues will go to investment, that's to support the national budget. And because of these discretionary powers, we've had, particularly we have the Ghana Stabilization Fund, which was established by the PRMA to, as a form of buffer in times of where there are petroleum revenue shortages coming from shocks from the international market. But when you study the use of the stabilization fund properly, you realize that significant portion of the fund has rather gone into debt servicing instead of stabilizing petroleum revenues locally where there are shocks. And those are some of the discretionary powers, because the Minister for Finance at any time can cap how much goes into the stabilization fund. And the law does not state any minimum. So at any point in time where we have shocks, sometimes the balance in there is not sufficient to make up the shortfall, or the Minister of Finance totally abandoned the idea of using the funds to smoothing the national budget as the law requires, but rather channel it into the sinking fund and later to debt servicing. So the stabilization fund has more or less becomes a conduit fund to servicing our debt instead of smoothing our national budget in cases of petroleum shortfalls. And it's difficult to fault the minister or bring the minister into account to this, because the law gives him that room to manage the petroleum revenues in that manner. So like I mentioned earlier, the laws exist, but these are some of the loopholes that give room for public officials to work around it, and accountability mechanisms are not able to bring them into account. So I want to just bring my presentation here. And my wish is that going forward, this can be replicated in our mineral resource sector, so that there will be a revenue management framework that governs the entire mineral revenue receipts and not just the mineral royalties. And also have this replicated in other countries, because despite the shortfalls, I think it's still progressive and still creates room for more information to be put out there for civil societies and other accountability institutions such as Parliament and other stakeholders to monitor government's use of resource revenues and ensure that they are equitably distributed and citizens get to benefit from the natural resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mabel. That was very, very useful, Mabel, with respect to the Ghanaian experience. It's quite interesting to understand that that discretionary policy that is basically dependent upon the political will of the Minister of Finance. I think that's something we need to look at very closely. But anyway, before we come to that kind of a concluding remark, let's look at to see whether anybody can come in again from either Nigerian, Ghanaian, or Sierra Leonean perspective before giving the floor to the consultant, to the resource person.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. For me, as CSOs, we have a lot to do in advocacy to make sure that revenues from the mining sector or from the extractive sector are really utilized, particularly to benefit the communities from which these minerals are coming from. Okay. And failure to do this most times pose threats to the lead to unrest. We've got those incidences in Sierra Leone, in a place called Tonkolili Bumbuna, where we have the radio faults, a lot of mining, iron ore mining is going on there in Kono district, for example. So as CSOs, for me moving forward, we have a lot to do. And the gap between the communities and the policy makers should be bridged so that they know in terms of consultation what is happening with mining companies, what the community should benefit, like my brother said. But most times these pieces of information are just held by central government. We've seen in Sierra Leone where communities were taken to court because they are saying no to certain mining companies. And this is not good. They should know the revenues. They should know the incomes that are coming from their communities. And the area of concession, we are West Africa, or Sierra Leone in particular, is a poor country, poor developing country. Most times we depend on donor partners to help our countries, even to pay salaries to some sectors. So the area of concession, again, has to be looked into. We are very poor. We cannot have a mining company coming to Sierra Leone to make huge profit. They keep on giving that mining company concession, tax concession. Again, that will directly hinder the revenues that are coming from mining communities. And like somebody said, these discussions need to be sustained, maybe made physically in countries like Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria. And to me, I will recommend that they can be held in mining communities. These discussions will help. When they are localized, will help a lot. So the information gap can also be bridged. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, somebody wants to come in.
Yeah, just to add to what my brother said, Mercy, I think peer learning is also, peer learning is key here. So from the consultants, you will see that, Are you getting me?
Yes, go ahead. Well, just
Yes.
1 minute because we are far behind time.
I know. So peer learning is key here.
Yeah.
So how we can learn from each other as CSOs. That is how Ghana has done it well, how Nigeria, Senegal, and Sierra Leone has done it well. So having that will sort of empower us to see how we can utilize those experiences.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Somebody wants to talk.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Is that John? Yes, go ahead. Make your point.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Hello. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hello. Go ahead. Make your point.
Hello?
Yeah, we are saying hello, but your line, you're not. Hello? Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Oh God. Hello? Go ahead, make your point. Okay. For the time being, can I invite let me invite the resource person to respond to some of the comments whilst awaiting this gentleman to make a point. Mr. Ture, the floor is yours to respond to some of the comments made from across the country, and with key focus on some of the recommendations already made. For instance, Abiodun spoke critically about losing $500 million annually, which is so challenging for Nigeria, especially the grassroots community suffering from extractive companies in their respective communities, and no accountability metrics and allocation of resources is not really trickling down to the people that are really expected to benefit from those resources. And the discretionary policy of Ghana, while the community stabilization fund, community development fund is not also trickling down to communities and mining communities across Sierra Leone. So these are some of the key points made so far. Can you comment on them as well?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kali, for this opportunity. I'm very happy, actually, that so many people were able to comment and contribute to this discussion. That's exactly what we are looking for. I think let me maybe start by thanking our friend and good partner, Mr. Egbul, who supported the work that we did in Nigeria. He provided a number of information that were very, very useful and helpful. And thank you, my friend, and thank you to all other participants. I was very much delighted to hear actually the comments that were made by I think it's Maybell from Ghana. I was very much aware of that problem, and I want to use that actually that alarm. I mean that red flag that she raised to draw the attention of the Senegalese participant who are joining here, because we have the same problem in the regulation in the Senegalese law on revenue management. That's one of the big problem I personally have with the Senegalese law, and you never realize that until you decide to make to do some modeling. If you try to put the numbers and see exactly what you will get, you realize that there are a number of parameters that are not available to you because it's left discretionary actually in the law, and unless you have the multi-year program, I don't know how they call it, the document de programmation, which is the programming. A document that is actually the benchmark document, let's say, that is supposed to clarify a certain targets and indicators so that you can you can do your analysis. So this is a challenge, and I'm glad that from Ghanaian experience we were able, that challenge has been identified, and I think improvement were made in the latest version of the regulation, the 2019. So I think it's something that is very useful. In terms of for Nigeria, I think it's clear that the issue that is raised, in my view, is actually what happens once the money move from central to state, or money from central to local government. We need to do the same work that civil society is doing at the central level, making sure that clear accountability mechanism, clear participation, because you may have a good level of participation at the national level, but not a very good level of participation of civil society at the state level, for example. And unless you have that, it's going to be difficult for civil society to claim any accountability from, generate any accountability from that process. So I think there's some more work that needs to be done. It's a very difficult process indeed, but it requires a lot of expertise and sometimes resources, so that you have a long-term commitment from partners who really take time to understand that process from a very operational point of view, from a very practical point of view. Otherwise, it's a lot of theory and economic theory here and there, and at the end of the day, the community don't get the resource that should benefit them. I think that's the small contribution that I wanted to make. And thank you again for your participation.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Toure. I think you concluded it very, very well. I think we also believe in partnership and collaborative engagement to speak with one voice as civil society organization to address our common challenges of fostering to influence policy processes in our respective countries. We realize that although some of these policies are there, they are there. Our constitution reflects the needs of people. But at the end of the day, the implementation of those laws are not really reflecting towards addressing the challenges.
That's a challenge.
so we have those challenges. So the goal is, that's why we very much embark on fostering partnership to speak with one voice. As a Pan-African civil society, that has been a part of our mandate, part of our mission and vision and reality, because we know that no matter how we look at it, there are definitely ways of addressing this using common voices. Because if you look at countries like Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, these are post-conflict countries, and the natural resource has been part of either the fueling factor, the root causes, and it is still there. Yet still at this post-conflict period, they still continue having the same problem. The structural indicators of problem are there. And you see, you come to the realization that no matter how we look at it, there will come a point when we'll either go back to what causes the civil war, or we have continuous problems. Like somebody mentioned in Tonkolili, in Sierra Leone, these are things, continuous challenges communities are facing. Ghana and Nigeria, Ghana and Senegal, these are stable countries with clear thread of clear political transition, and they've started benefiting from these resources. Like Abiodun said, there is a need for these countries to have a deeper reflection on how to ensure they don't slide to some of the challenges Nigeria is facing at this moment. So I think those are like key, very good recommendations for us to come together, speak with one voice, to some extent, even go down to the community to address the communication gap. I think it's key. So on that note, I would like to thank the participant and the resource person, but for me to do it better, I want to invite the executive director of the Gore Institute, who has, through his leadership, we've been able to we've been able to sustain support from a respective institution. We started from 2011, 12, 13 to this present day. Through its leadership, we are able to get resources to do what we are doing now. Let me invite the Executive Director of Gore Institute, Mr. Duduja, who is here listening to the conversation, to give a closing remarks to this webinar. Mr. Duduja, the floor is yours, sir. Hello, Mr. Jia. Hello. I think he's having some connection problems. So, unfortunately, he's connected, but I think he's on another engagement. So, on behalf of the leadership of the Gore Institute, colleagues and partners, and our funding institution, Ford Foundation, who generously continue to support the Gore Institute, I would like to express thanks and immense thanks and appreciation for this experience shared. This is just a starting point. We have more activities, more engagement coming on board. We are all partners in this process, and we will not surprised to hear receive an invitation for us. We'll be organizing a much more physical conference seminar coming up in November, end of November, which will basically have more time to reflect on some of these realities.
That's good. That would be good.
Yes, definitely in Senegal. So we look forward to much deeper reflection on some of these issues that are affecting the fabric of our society, which has crumbled our environment, our communities, and in which the only way to address some of these things is when we all collectively speak with the same voice and to foster African solution to African problem. On that note, I want to close the webinar with in anticipation that the discussion just started, but will continue in the nearest future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kali. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.